approval of the minutes from the last meeting. Are there any comments, corrections, or a motion on the last minutes?
I move they be approved.
Okay,
Second.
okay. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, motion passes. Thank you. The next agenda item is announcements, and I'm going to turn that over to Jessica Boland.
Thank you. Yes, just had a couple things. So welcome to the new space. This is just in an effort, I think, to align all the boards so they're more uniform in where they meet. And just to remind you again, this is being live streamed. And also wanted just, as a housekeeping thing, I guess, with the board members, unfortunately, Kim Pearson did resign from the board this week. So we are moving ahead with filling her position. We'll keep you informed on that. So we're sorry to see her go, just couldn't make it work with her schedule. And as Megan, I think, mentioned at the last meeting, the tree cap and Bee City Committee updates are now going to be shared via email, or maybe that was over an email that she said that, but instead of having a placeholder for it during this meeting, if anything is emailed to her, then, we'll share it via email instead of taking it part of the meeting. And also a reminder that the three environmental boards are meeting on November 2nd at 6 p.m. The EAB, the Bee City, and the tree cap. And that will be held in Town Hall, Room 3A. And that's all I had.
Okay, great. Thank you, Jessica. Okay. The next agenda item is the development updates, the town council meeting rezoning results, which I believe Shelley Mayo will be discussing with us.
I'm going to try to pull that up on my screen and share it with you on the screens below. Just 1 second while we get there. Y'all let me know if you can see this or cannot.
So far, we're not seeing it,
Are you just seeing yourselves?
just seeing ourselves.
Issue new teams, Fernando, and let me know. Okay. We're working to get IT to correct that.
Um,
Thank you. Do I need to zoom in a little bit more, or is this reasonably visible?
It's not readable.
yeah, if you could zoom in a little bit more, please.
Not readable at all. I don't think it'll be
I will
readable
do
if
my
you
very
zoom
best.
in.
I'm just gonna zoom in on the conditions that you all recommended then, since I can only do one half of that at a time. So this is for Yellow Bridge. That was heard at the September 13th meeting.
Okay.
Whoops, sorry about that, Fernando. So they did add, or they did not add the solar PV systems to the 50 homes. They did add conduit, the pet waste stations, the signage near environmentally sensitive areas. They increased the design for the stormwater pre and post attenuation requirements. They added a zoning condition to minimize tree clearing, installation of the SCM or infrastructure in any zone of the riparian buffer, except as necessary for town utilities. They also added the condition about 75 to 80% of the species used for landscaping will be native to the eastern U.S. Included landscaping for the warm season grasses for drought resistance, and increased the number of native hardwood species, and increased biodiversity and green infrastructure. The green infrastructure option that they selected was the pollinator food and bird food sources and the warm season irrigation. Since there wasn't a more specific recommendation made with that one, those are the ones that staff determined complied with that option. So out of all of the options that or all of the recommendations they were provided, they only left off one of them. I apologize, there was a second page to this. I thought I had all of the conditions. So they actually left out 3 of the total. So they did not add the signage or fence along the edges of the RCA. They did have a response to that though, which said that in their opinion, it's the homeowner's responsibility to know where their boundaries are located. They also did not offer to add one of the certifications, the green building certifications, saying instead that each builder has their own certification process, and that setting just one of those or opting for just one could make that more of a problem for the builders. And then they did add the outdoor lighting condition that was requested, and that condition will apply everywhere except for single-family homes, townhouses, accessory buildings, and street lighting, which is typical for a residential building.
Would it be possible for us to get this emailed to
Yes,
us?
sir.
Thank you.
Definitely.
Can you
I'm
show?
sorry, what you asked?
Sorry.
Email,
Yeah.
I can definitely send that by email, that's not a problem.
yeah.
Can you show the response for the solar, the one that was also not added?
In lieu of solar panels, the applicant committed to affordable housing on this development, and they were not able to support both.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. And then the only other rezoning case that we had in September was the 1010 Business Park. This particular case was heard quite a while ago. It's been awaiting some resolution to some issues. So you all heard this in early 2021. So it's been a little while. It's a piece that's on 1010, just north of the Knights.
Where the tower is.
Knights Play, thank you. I'm terrible with names. So one of the things that was requested was a 12-foot type C buffer along the easternmost and westernmost boundaries of the piece being rezoned. That condition was added, and that the applicant should minimize stream crossings to the greatest extent practicable. That condition was not added simply because the streams that would have been reflected in this condition were not actually a part of the area of the rezoning. They were rezoning a piece of the property closest to the road, not the entirety of the property. The rest of the property that was not rezoned is what had the stream crossings on it, and so there's no way for that to be associated with a piece of property that has no streams. So they did add the condition that they were able to at the time. And then there was one other rezoning that went to town council, but that rezoning was exempt from having to see this board because it was under 1 acre and was essentially just done to resolve a nonconformity. The property owner, when the house was staked on the lot, the staking was done incorrectly, and the house actually crossed a building setback. And so the rezoning was entirely to adjust that building setback so that the property owner who built his own house didn't have to tear his house down and redo it. So that one was just not something that needed to come to this board.
And so these are just the two that moved on in September, or three that moved on in September, or that have moved on since the EAB's inception?
So at this point, I'm only giving you the previous months.
Okay.
If you would like me to do something with all of the ones prior to that, that will take me a significant amount of time to do. We haven't been tracking that as closely as we could. We have records of it, they're just not all in one place. To give you an estimate, the update that was given to you last month by Amanda took me 4.5 hours to put together. So, and that was only from 3 months, 2 to 3 months worth of meetings. I'm happy to do it, it's just, it might take me a few months to get that to you, and in the meantime, it would be easier for me to give you the previous month's information.
There are other things that we can work on.
Okay, yeah, I don't think that, yeah, if it's taking that long, I don't know if it would be beneficial. Do you have any just a general sense about, are there certain things that are just simply not being accepted across the board?
At this point, the ones that are not being offered across the board are generally the green infrastructure recommendation, and that's simply because that recommendation is incredibly broad and is very difficult for the developers to determine at rezoning if they can do. Green infrastructure is a very complicated series of options. It involves a variety of things, mostly around stormwater, but there are so many potential options for how you could go about doing that, that it's very, very tricky to just say, hey, we want you to do some green infrastructure stuff. It would be something that staff would be willing to provide more education to the board on, so if you'd like, more information so that you can get a little more familiar with it and try to figure out if there are particular items you'd like to see. That's not a problem. And then it's also something that, because it regularly involves, it's generally considered to involve kind of street side stormwater in the right of way. The town doesn't currently recommend approval of that, simply because we have a separated water resources and public transportation and public works department. And so the question of who would fund that and who would take over long-term maintenance of that is a complicated issue. It's not something that we're against, at least in my conversations with both departments, but it's a longer-term set of options that we would have to kind of wade through carefully to determine. So at the moment, we aren't there yet. And the only places that are encouraged, or at least under our previous public works director, we have just recently gotten a new public works director, and so I haven't had a chance to broach this with him. He's only been in his position a few weeks, so a month maybe. So we're still working on some of this stuff, but it could be done on private developments. So shopping centers, amenity centers, those kinds of things would be easier to do, because then that's privately maintained and it doesn't have as much to do with town funding and the very complicated dance that has to happen anytime you talk about public money. So there are potentials for doing it in private development that do not currently exist in Apex for public. Like I said, I'm happy to get you guys some more educational information on that. We have some great books that we can get you, some great pamphlets as well. And the Water Resources Department has our lovely Jessica Boland, among others, who can answer some questions. But that one's just very complicated and hasn't been accepted just because it's very broad.
Yeah.
Solar panels on apartments are also a difficult issue. The only time it's been accepted lately has been when they're intended to address the amenity centers that the apartments include, so that the apartment complex can more easily mitigate their own electricity usage. We did find out a couple of months ago that it is legal for the apartment companies to put solar panels, and then essentially if they're connected to Duke or Apex Electric, they would get the same credits
Yeah.
that everybody else would, but it could be complicated to determine which apartment residents would get the benefits of those. So it would have to be in a situation where the apartment owner pays the electric bill and then divvies it up, is what we've been told by apartment owners. There's also the issue that a lot of apartment builders don't necessarily hold on to their apartment complexes long-term. So the same problem that we have with other forms of residential development. But we have found that they are much more likely to include solar panels in order to address the amenity center or other internal lighting that is paid for 100% by the community itself, or to help to say offset the charging from the new electric vehicles, charging stations that people are having to add, those kinds of things. I can't think of any other ones that have been regularly either changed or rejected. Most of the time, if something is offered, that it's either modified or it doesn't, most of the time if something is rejected, it is either modified or it's something that just won't fit on that particular development after staff has gone and done some more digging and after we've gotten more information with the rezoning cases. But those are the two that we tend to have the biggest issues with, and to be fair, those are the two with the largest price tags, so it's not surprising in particular. I do want to let y'all, actually, I will wait for the next item to say what I was about to say.
Okay. Do you all have any additional questions for Shelley on this topic? Okay. I did have one question, just sort of circling back when you said it, some of the green infrastructure things could be done on private developments. Does that include like mixed use developments, or are you talking just exclusively like some sort of retail industrial type of development?
That could include mixed use. It also could include apartments. It simply means that it wouldn't be the portions of land that are owned and maintained by the town.
Those are public right away.
So public
it would
right
have
of
to
way,
be all
public
It has to be
utility
private
easements.
streets or
Okay.
private,
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so no roads that are going to be built by the builder and turned over to the town, those
Right.
are a no-go.
And
Okay,
the town doesn't allow private roads, so it would have to, the only developments that don't have, public roads would be apartments and shopping centers, industrial parks, that kind of thing.
okay,
So they generally have what we call private driveways or private parking areas that you can access that with them.
okay, all right, thank you.
Mhm.
Okay. If there are no more questions on this topic, we'll go ahead and move on to the working group updates, the UDO amendment. Shelley is actually going to give us an update on that. Just to remind everybody, John, Adam, and I had been working on that, and then we sort of hit a lull. And then Shelley has picked it back up, and she's going to talk about it a little bit more, about where we're at.
So, as you all know, we've been working on basically redoing the suggested zoning conditions document to make it easier for the board, easier for the staff, and easier for the applicants to use. August and September were just very, very busy, so Adam and Suzanne and John all got me great documents, and then I didn't have time to put them together. So, what I've been working on today is kind of bringing those together. You'll see this is just very broad. I'm simply trying to show you what it is expected to look like. So we have broken this into residential and non-residential. Mr. Jensen's looking like he can't see, so I'm.
Yeah, I put my glasses on.
And by residential, we mean single-family and townhome subdivisions, excluding any parking lots, exterior building lights, or exterior architecture. By non-residential, we're also including apartments, and that's purely because they function in a way that's very similar to other non-residential developments. They're typically one owner. They typically have one person that you go and talk to about any concerns that you might have as far as the town goes. And they have large parking lots. They just very much function similarly to non-residential development. And so we've taken what we currently have listed as the suggested zoning conditions, and we've actually kind of changed those and labeled them as goals, because the language that they're written in at the moment isn't an enforceable zoning condition. Staff has to take the goals that you all provide us with and convert them into language that we can actually use to enforce as a zoning condition. Typically, zoning conditions are required to have a trigger of some kind. They are required to have a proportion or a number or a catch, and something that we can use to hold onto it and say, now is the time when this has to be done.
Shelley, can you enlarge that a little bit more? It's still a little hard to see from there. Thank you, ma'am.
As good as I can get it.
That, I'll take it, thanks.
Okay. We've added columns, and when Val was still with us, she was very helpful with this, on the right-hand side. And these are for the developer to check when they're submitting this, once it's converted to a PDF. Yes, no, or not applicable. And this is for every one of them. And so we've taken the goals and put that in bold, and then the green text is suggested zoning condition language. Any text that is underlined is either a number that staff is suggesting but can be changed, or is indicating that there is a number that needs to be filled in by the applicant. This is just an example of one. Increasing the riparian buffer widths from surface waters in environmentally sensitive areas. The idea being that if, say, there's an ephemeral stream that typically has a 50-foot riparian buffer surrounding it, if it's an area that is particularly sensitive, perhaps the EAB would like to see a 60-foot buffer instead. In which case, this language would say, at least the project shall increase the riparian buffer width by at least 10 feet above the minimum required by the Unified Development Ordinance. And that's because saying that it needs to be increased above the UDO is great, but a developer could increase that by 1 foot technically, and that would suffice to comply with what's being proposed without this language. And then we just have the explanation of how that's going to be measured, just in case somebody decides that they want to argue. And then just another example, low impact development is a series of stormwater techniques. They're several of them are defined in the stormwater manual that DEQ puts out. Had to double check that. And this is just saying that if you all want to require that at least one of those techniques be proposed, again, that one is underlined, so you could change that, or the applicant could propose a different number of them. And this is just saying that would be a minimum of one, and that specific type of technique would be reviewed and approved by the Water Resources Department at site or subdivision plan review. We've gone through the list, and I'm just kind of trying to finalize some formatting and some specific languages on some other ones. We have a couple, for example, where we have multiple options that and these are just things that staff has thought about. These are not the only options that the developer can offer. This is just language that staff has been able to kind of wrap our brains around and suggestions that we've been able to think about. So if a developer says no, but comes in with a different condition that still meets that goal, then that's something that can still be evaluated either by y'all or by staff. This is not intended to be the be-all, end-all list. This is simply intended to give examples of the kinds of language that we regularly see and guidance to developers who perhaps don't want to spend a whole bunch of time reinventing the wheel and just want to use one of our previously approved conditions. I anticipate getting this out to the three-member panel that I'm working with, hopefully by the end of next week. I'm hoping to schedule a meeting with them sometime the first part of November and finalize those last little bits. Since November is a very short month because of Thanksgiving, we probably won't bring it to the board finally. We'll probably email it to the board to look at, but then bring it to the board for a vote and evaluation possibly in December. That's my tentative timeline for y'all at this point. Do you have any questions for me?
First of all, I just want to thank you for the amount of work that you have put into this. It has been hours and hours and hours, and I really do appreciate it. And I think this will be very helpful both for the applicant as well as folks on the board who aren't so versed at writing zoning conditions. They just know kind of an idea of what they want, but they have no idea how to phrase it. So I think this will be a really good thing. And that timeline sounds perfect, and John and Adam and I will plan on meeting with you sometime in the first part of November, if you can get it done. But if not, totally understandable.
Well, thank you.
Thank you, Shelley. I appreciate that. Okay, so the next item we have is a pre-application meeting, and it is the Apex Gateway Phase 1 amendment. And is the applicant speaking to the amendment, or?
I'll do whatever you like. I didn't know, typically Amanda gives the overview, but I'm happy to give it whatever, or at least you did in the last one.
If you would like to, that would be fantastic. I am pulling that up right now. If I recall, it's just a single condition that's being amended.
Yes, ma'am. Yeah. Do you by chance have the, any of the site plan attachments, or is it just the?
I do.
Great. Well, thank you for everyone's time. I'm Walker Gorham. I'm the Triangle Market Leader for Beacon Partners, and the Development Manager for Apex Gateway. And as was stated for our Phase 1, I'm trying to remember when we did this virtually, but just I was going to give a quick refresh just since I know it's been a few months. But Phase 1 of our project was on the northeast corner of 64 and 751. It's, I think, 134 acres total. The Mills Estate and the Gray family on that northeast corner. And really just wanted to revisit one of the zoning conditions with respect to tree save, tree replacement. And as we went through this process with the board, and full transparency, we had not yet completed our existing condition survey or our tree survey. The board asked and recommended for a replacement condition for existing trees greater than 18 inches in diameter that are removed from the site in our disturbance area to be replaced by a planting of a 1.5 inch caliper native tree from the Apex Design and Development Manual, either on site or at an alternate location approved by staff. And we are proposing to revise that condition from 18 inches to 24 inches. And again, in the spirit of transparency, on a typical project of this size, we're active throughout the Carolinas. If you would have asked me what we thought our tree replacement requirement would have been here, I would have said 50 to 100 trees. And just because of the nature of the ownership here, when we completed the survey, there were 2,135 trees identified on site that were 18 inches or greater. And our disturbance area, approximately half of the site, so 1,150 of those 18-inch or greater trees were identified and would propose to be removed based on our development footprint and proposed site plan. The town code currently allows for a replacement ratio for the 1.5-inch calipers at 1 per 100 feet. And when reviewing potential replacement plan with our civil engineers as well as our landscaping consultants, the feedback from North American Landscaping, who we've used on several thousand acres of commercial development, was that they strongly advise a replanting ratio for 1.5-inch calipers at 1 per 300, and that if you go any more dense than that, that you're going to have a survival of the fittest scenario, whereby if we were to plant 1,000 trees at that ratio, up to half of those are not going to get the sunlight once the canopies mature, and then ultimately are going to end up dying. And obviously those trees that we're purchasing at 1.5 inches are coming from another farm. So we've worked fairly extensively with Amanda and staff. We take the sustainability component of our projects extremely seriously. And so what we're trying to identify is a win-win, whereby we're not just harvesting trees from an alternate location and planting them in a way that some of those aren't going to survive and therefore is waste. I think the feedback from our survey, if you look at our, does the pointer work on the mouse here? Can you guys see the pointer here? Okay, so part of the intent with the site plan configuration now is to try to align the buildings on the northeast portion of the assemblage furthest away from the hard corner of US 64 and 751. And again, part of that is a function of the dedication that's going to occur for a potential future collector road that NCDOT and the town are still collaborating on. But a big portion of it was at the request of some of the neighbors to the north on 751 who are not participating in the assemblage, who want to preserve the buffer. And so the net impact, if we were to commit to the 18 inches as the current conditional zoning reads, would be that we would end up having to clear cut at least 10 of these acres, which by doing so, we would just be cutting down trees to then go and plant back trees on that same acreage. And so from our perspective, we just want to present the issue to staff and to the board and come up with a solution that we think makes sense and that, again, is practical and meets the spirit of what we were trying to honor and commit from the front end. So again, if you're looking at an aerial here, the Mills family has a gravel drive lane off of 751, and the majority of this frontage, thank you, has not been forested or timbered for decades, and so has mature canopy throughout. And again, what we're trying to come up with is a solution whereby we're not clear cutting this acreage that has hundreds of trees just to provide sufficient replanting area for the 1,000 18-inch trees. So the proposed condition of 24 inches based on the existing survey would result in a replacement, or excuse me, would result in the removal of approximately 154 trees, which would only require us to clear cut an additional 4 acres to replace those 154 trees. And so for perspective, we had asked Amanda if there was a potential alternative whereby we could commit to participating with Parks and Rec and replanting off-site at some of the town's municipal or public sites. And in calendar year 2021, or I believe she said the last 12 months, the town has only planted 100 trees. And so We're admittedly still working with Amanda to come up with some type of a replacement program. Some municipalities have fee in lieu programs whereby instead of planting them, you can provide a like-kind cost to Parks and Rec or to the town for future plantings. We would be open to that. Per Amanda, that program does not exist yet, and I think there's some second order effects or conditions around that. But the bottom line is that we want to come up with a win-win solution, and we're committed to working with staff on potential replacement property in the future. But we are going to be pursuing an amendment to the Phase 1 zoning. So I don't know if there's anything that I left out or that you would add to that. So yeah, I'll stop and answer any questions the best that I can.
Questions or comments?
Well, just a comment from council's perspective. I mean, our goal is to, preserve as much canopy as we can.
Yes, ma'am.
And then replant wherever makes sense. So not necessarily forcing you to replant on your property, but if that doesn't work,
Right.
thinking about other, properties around town. And I know we've talked about parks, and we've talked about, I know this board, I think, has talked about, conversation with DOT, in the right of way. I'd really like for us to pursue that. And I don't know what the next right steps of that would be, but the goal is to try to be as logical and sensible about this and to protect existing canopy as much as possible.
Yeah, we agree, and we'd be totally open to that. In total candor, this isn't a cost thing. This is just, we would be clear cutting a bunch of trees to then replace them with plantings, and we wouldn't have recommended the 24 inches, or excuse me, the 18-inch replacement had we had the tree survey. And I don't know if you have the tree survey attachment. It's not all that helpful. It shows thousands of trees throughout the entire site. But if we would have had that exhibit, the thing that's helpful with the tree survey is it does allocate the 2,000 plus trees by diameter, and we could have seen this has an abnormally large percentage of mature trees, and so it doesn't make sense to replace at 18 inches and then end up cutting down hundreds of smaller trees. So again, I think it was just an honest, I don't want to say a mistake, but we were just not at that stage in the due diligence to have our existing conditions and survey done. And so we were trying to commit to something, and we're still committed to finding out how we can work with the town on the replacement for the balance of those trees. And so if that's through Parks and Rec, DOT, we've offered for some, we have one other large economic development project, the Empire's distributor site at the former Cash Corporate, or now Apex Commerce Center. But again, it just doesn't have the acreage to accommodate that many trees. So we're absolutely open to coming up with a solution to find alternate relocation areas that don't require clear cutting of existing canopy. So-
Just so I'm clear, going from 18 inches to 24 inches, the number you're talking about goes from what, 1150 down to 154?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yep. And we have that exhibit that has the chart.
Well, I can definitely pull up the chart. I do just want to show you all this overall sheet to give you an idea of what we're looking at. It may be difficult to see, but the individual gray specks that you're seeing on here, that is, each and every one of those is an 18-inch minimum size tree.
So we're still seeing the old,
Now this is the tree survey. It's just the gray specks are very, very light
okay.
on here.
Do you mind zooming out real quick? Because there's, if we could see, no problem. Okay. The shading here is difficult to see, but with my cursor, I'm gonna show you, this is the property boundary line between the Gray family's property, the 34 acres in the northernmost section of the site, and then this is the Mills property. And the Gray property is more indicative of what we're used to seeing. And I'm actually gonna hold this up, and I apologize, but it's a little bit easier to see just in terms of the different shading. But you can see there's several dozen existing trees on the Gray property, and then you have 2,000 on the Mills. And again, it's just a function of there not being any clearing or harvesting activities for probably hundreds of of years on site. So that's what, you know, has
Yeah.
led to the
Yeah.
issue. And again, we think we can come up with a win-win for the town and are totally open to working with Amanda and staff on replacement property.
And Councilmember Stallings, staff has been actively pursuing some alternative options as far as replanting, and partnerships with some other groups as well, including possibly one with Wake County Public Schools. So we're working on that, and I may have an update on that in a couple of months. And I've talked to Amanda about some of that as well. So
Okay,
hopefully we
great.
can help out. To give you all an idea, this is the one of the 2 pages of tables that they provided us with. It is extremely difficult for me to read at this scale. This is 15 rows or 15 columns with over 30 rows apiece. And nothing on here is smaller than an 18-inch caliper tree.
Do you, Shelley, is it possible, and I don't know if you have this attachment, but there's this attachment that is from the surveyor. You're looking at the one from, you're looking at the tree survey from our civil engineer, but this does have a slightly more succinct table, but if not, we can provide this to staff and to the board, but it shows the allocation by diameter of the trees that supports the 154, but we can make sure that that's
All
forward.
I have is the civil drawings.
Okay.
Was it the sheet that you sent, was that?
I'm not sure. It's okay. I'll make sure, I will forward it and make sure it gets to staff and to the board so they can review it, but.
One comment I do have about this is that if you are seeing this many trees over 18 inches, from a natural resources standpoint, that is an amazing property. And that's the kind of property that should be preserved and conserved. And, you know, I would not be surprised if it's an incredibly biodiverse area as well, where you're gonna have habitat for bats and birds and probably all kinds of plants. And so, and all of that comes with what you're saying is a mature forest that are not common around here. Additionally, it's also, if the trees are that old and that large, they are capturing a ton of carbon, and they're helping with capture greenhouse gas emissions.
Yep.
So this would really be a place where you would not want to take out that many trees, and certainly not trees of that size. And I also will say it does not make common sense to cut down a mature forest to try and plant it back. I mean, you're gonna disturb the soil ecosystem and everything that goes along with that. So that piece does not make sense.
And I acknowledge your points, and I don't disagree. I think it's a balance. So part of the thought with the disturbance area being pulled back was to try to retain, 40-plus acres that we're obviously paying full market for as tree buffer and conservation. But it's noted, and regarding the carbon capture comment, again, we're committed to finding replacement locations for it. We just don't want to clear cut existing canopy to replace it with farmed and harvested canopy. It's not responsible.
Yeah, and it doesn't make any sense. Is it possible for you to shift your RCA around to capture more of these large the areas with the large trees where they're particularly
We looked at
dense?
that, it's just they're everywhere. I mean, if you look on the Mills property, it's just never been touched. And so there's no way to do anything here without disturbing the trees. And so the best thing we can do is to try to consolidate our disturbance area, leave as much of the frontage along the hard corner, both from a buffering standpoint for nuisance, light, noise, everything, but also to make sure that, I think frankly, a lot of developers would look to rough grade and clear cut that whole area for visibility, and we're retaining it all intentionally. So we're trying.
Are you talking about the area that's along the road frontage that might be in the right-of-way that's gonna be acquired, or?
I'm talking about the additional 20 acres to the east of the
Okay.
proposed collector road. So I don't know if can I click back onto the tab? I don't think it's letting me do that, but if you go back to the other exhibit that shows the actual buildings on the site plan.
Just out of curiosity, where is that site plan in the approval process?
We are in the process of working on the grading plan with staff right now. So it has been submitted but not approved. So do you have the previous exhibit that shows where the buildings were? But this is the line of disturbance here. And so we're proposing to retain all of the area here and all of the existing buffering, as opposed to clear cutting that and grading so that we can have line of sight visibility from the proposed collector road, which admittedly is still probably years out. So I'm not saying that mitigates all the concerns. I'm just saying that we're trying to be mindful of them, and we're committed to, from a carbon recapture standpoint, to the replacement.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, me personally, it doesn't make sense to alter the zoning conditions simply because there's too many trees. And too many large trees. From an environmental standpoint, that's not, we're trying to keep such things. Any other questions or comments from the board?
I'll just concur with what Councilwoman Stallings said and Vice Chair Suzanne said, that clearing existing trees that are already proven to be alive and making it makes no sense to do that. So working with other departments and like you say, working on Wake County Public Schools, I think is a fantastic idea to help with the replanting back.
That's not I just want to clarify that is
Option.
not a guaranteed option at the moment. That's
Right.
something that I'm exploring with another staff member that we may be able to work out.
And I
But we
think,
can definitely.
Yeah, we've just told staff that we're committed to finding replacement property and in whatever means the staff feels like is appropriate. And so if that's on town-owned property, if that's in collaboration with other private property owners, we want to do what's right. Just want to make sure it makes sense and we're not.
One of the concerns that staff has about this, about having to redo this number of trees, is simply that the town already has a very difficult time finding places to plant trees just for Arbor Day. Although it may look like we have a lot of land that doesn't have trees on it, we have a lot of land with underground utilities that you cannot plant trees on top of without them damaging future water and sewer lines in a very short order. We have a lot of neighborhoods, as a matter of fact, where we have trees planted particularly in townhomes, where we have trees planted too close to existing utility easements, and we've gone through recently and done some camera studies where we put cameras in the pipes, and those pipes may not be blocked yet, but they have a lot of tree roots in them, and it's only a matter of time. We're definitely committed to helping this applicant find places for the trees. It's simply that this is 2,100, right?
Yeah, well, in the disturbance area, 1,100.
1,100.
2,100 total at the property. We're retaining half outside of the disturbance area and 1,100 in. the
So
disturbance area.
1,100 trees to relocate is more than we anticipated when staff recommended the zoning condition as well. I'm not disagreeing with anything that you're saying. I'm just trying to give you the information that we have as well to help you with your decision.
And could DOT be a next option too? You think about the school system, then
It's possible.
Possible.
It's possible that DOT could be someone that we could work with. We are trying to explore those. Unfortunately, working with any other government body is going to take as much or more time as it takes town staff to do things. Just because if anything, most other government bodies are even more short-staffed.
and hopefully the county is a little easier to work with than the state, so
We'll do our best.
I feel sure the county would be more than happy to.
Yeah, I would think the county.
Somebody pitch in to help out.
Does it have to be public property?
It doesn't. If they wanted to if they were able to find land that's cleared that they wanted to plant on as well, they would either need to purchase it or get the approval from the owners. The only concern that we have, though, is that if that land is planted now without a conservation easement of some kind moving forward, it could just as easily be redeveloped in a couple of years and those same trees be cut down at that point. Now that is purely something that we've talked about. That's not something that has made its way into the decision-making process or anything yet. But the developer could either purchase additional land or work with another property owner to do that. And we have talked about working with third-party nonprofits as well.
And I
So-
wonder if land trusts, I have heard of people in Apex in certain areas who have said, I've tried to sell my land to Triangle Land Conservancy, but they wouldn't buy it for whatever reason. They do have criteria for determining what properties they're gonna buy, and they wouldn't take it. So they want to do the right thing, or the thing they feel is right, which is to conserve their property, but those routes have not come to fruition. So I wonder if there are landowners like that in Apex who could help in situations like this, who would be willing to sell their land and put it under easement to offset.
We would be happy to talk to those. We are not aware of anyone. But if anyone wanted to reach out and ask if they can provide names to us, we're happy to reach out to anybody. I do know that Triangle Land Conservancy has limited funding and, like you said, specific criteria for things. I know that they also do have some planned acquisitions in the area because they're looking at Lake Jordan. But they have to specialize in particular types of area first. And our assumption has been that since this is a Town of Apex zoning condition, it needs to be in the town's either jurisdiction or immediate surroundings, so it can't be too far out from it. So it's an interesting conundrum, and this is probably the first project that we've had come forward that has this rezoning condition on it, or the first one that's had this particular issue. So it's an interesting case.
I would like to say, because when my son was younger, we worked with the Department of Transportation. I may have said this before, and they were actually quite easy to work with at that time. Now, maybe it's changed since then, but they've got a lot of land. Every time I drive down Highway 1 or something, now maybe it's too far away from Apex, I don't know. But there's football fields that are available for plantings, I think. And it costs them a lot of money to mow those things all the time. So it's a benefit to them, and it could be a benefit to the developers to be able to do that on an easy, large-scale basis.
There's also a lot of, we're talking about 1,000 new trees, or 1,000 trees that are being.
Yeah, but gee, you look at some of those places, there's acres, multiple football fields that they've cleaned out, that they probably should be the ones to plant them back, not anybody else, but that doesn't work that way.
So it's probably us paying for it as a state since we're paying the taxes, so we're the ones paying for the additional cutting, but.
So you need from us a new zoning condition or a motion to change, or?
Staff needs either a motion to recommend to keep the existing zoning condition or a motion to recommend to approve the new, or to recommend the new condition, one or the other.
And the new
Or
condition
if
is.
you have a third option that you would like to recommend instead, that's a possibility. So the two options are to stay at the 18-inch caliper size or to change to the 24-inch. Or if there's an alternative number, that's an option as well, I suppose.
But I mean, the issue I see is we're talking 1,100 trees versus 154 trees, and we don't have a place for 154 trees right now, is that right?
154 trees would be much more easily found than 1,100 trees would be. I'm not super familiar with this particular site. They may not be able to be found to have a place planted on site.
We can accommodate all 1,100 on site. So if the zoning condition, the proposed amendment isn't changed, then we're just gonna clear cut 10 acres of existing canopy and replant trees to satisfy the condition. So what we're proposing is to modify it from 24 to 18 and then work with staff in the future to find additional locations or opportunities to supplement plantings in a responsible way. That's,
While that may not be the intent of the condition, that is unfortunately the language of the condition, is my understanding.
Can that be taken as a fee in lieu versus,
At the moment.
and the
because
reason I
of-
ask that, because it may not, you know, this project may come all the way through, and then the buildings are built and sublet or whatever it is, but we still haven't found a place for the trees to go, so is,
we've offered that,
Yeah.
sir, and the town has said that they can't, for a number of reasons right now, that they can't take fee in lieu payment. So we're we're gonna commit to doing what's right, and we'll find a location for them, but we've offered that to staff, and that's not a viable option for the town right now.
The town's legal staff has advised us that without special legislation from the state, we can't take any kind of fee in lieu type zoning condition at the moment. This is also one of the reasons why we've had to stop accepting donations for the affordable housing options when rezoning conditions come forward.
thank you.
Do you have diameters for each and every tree?
We do. I mean,
Okay.
they're allocated, I think, in 2-inch intervals on this chart. but-
Okay, and so how did you arrive at 24 versus some other increment, 20, 22?
It's a good question, but our tree consultant prepared an exhibit that the existing site disturbance area could accommodate without clear cutting more acreage. And so he said approximately 150, you could support 150 mature trees within the disturbance area. And so that's where the 24 inches came from.
But if we kept the 18 inches, then you could plant off-site, is that what you're saying?
There's no area to do it. That's the way that the ordinance currently reads, is that it has to be planted on owned property. It could be off-site, but it has to be owned property. We don't have the property to plant them. And so, again, we've offered to do that on town-owned property. The property doesn't exist. We've offered to plant through Parks and Rec. And Parks and Rec doesn't have the need for it currently. And so we're still working with staff to try to find a location for them, and we're committed to doing it. We've offered a fee in lieu payment. The town can't receive a fee in lieu payment, so we're trying to do everything we can to honor the spirit of the condition.
And we require the 2.5-inch caliper, is that what this situation is? Is it 2.5 inch?
The 1.5-inch
One and a
caliper.
half. Okay, I'm sorry. That was old.
And it does say, I thought it just said it had to be it could be planted off-site, not necessarily.
I'm not 100% familiar with the conversations that have been had with legal about this.
Okay.
I would defer to the applicant since he's been more involved in that. Amanda is handling this particular project.
Can I read the existing condition and the proposed? The existing condition says, trees greater than 18 inches in diameter that are removed by site development shall be replaced by planting a 1.5-inch caliper from the Town of Apex Design and Development Manual, either on-site or at an alternate location approved by the town planning staff.
Okay.
So we just need the
So
staff to tell
anywhere.
us where to, where it's approved, and we will plant them.
I'm reluctant, but I'm gonna throw out a motion to recommend that the zoning condition be changed from 18 inches in diameter to 24 inches in diameter. I don't like doing it, but I'm going to.
Didn't we also talk about like donations to other area nonprofits that are planting trees?
Unfortunate.
Is that not possible?
That is something that we have done in the past. My understanding is that, so you can certainly make that recommendation or make it an either or in your recommendation so that we can look into it more, but my understanding is that that falls similarly with accepting a fee in lieu as far as state law goes. It's not 100% clear whether that's illegal or not.
Yeah, we were told that we offered to make the payment to Parks and Rec, and we were told that was created legal issues. So again, we don't have an issue with doing that. It's just, that was per staff, not gonna be approved per council, so I think.
Okay, so we have a motion from John to up it to the 24 inches. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay. All in favor?
Can we discuss that just
Yes.
briefly? Because you
Sure.
suggested somewhere in between 18 and 24. And if it's in 2-inch increments, go with the 20-inch. I would suspect that ups it a bit. It troubles me a little bit that we're going from 1,500 trees to 150 trees.
Right, and I don't have, I have the exhibit, but I don't have the totals for the 20 inches, but presumably that's gonna be somewhere in the middle, again,
Yeah,
I'm just
exactly.
rationally. And so we're fine doing that, we're just gonna have to clear cut
The church.
You'll have to
existing.
clear cut to do that, or you could plant it off-site.
They don't have it.
I'll have it,
Place it.
yeah.
Well, if I may
Well,
say,
It doesn't have to be done today.
and we don't have the answer. We don't know. We don't know what the county could possibly do
Yeah.
because it hasn't been found out yet. So I'm uncomfortable too with this conversation, and I know I'm not a voting member, but I want to preserve as many trees as we can, and I want us to replace as many trees as we can, and we don't know. Wake County's a huge county.
Yeah.
So I would want us to pursue what possibilities exist in the county first.
I'd rather see like 20 inches, but in the motion, no clear cutting on property to replant. So that we would have to go off-site then someplace, but it doesn't have to be tomorrow. I know you guys don't want to drag this thing out for 10 years, but
The challenge is that all of our zoning conditions have to be met in order to get a certificate of occupancy and in order to get the
Yeah,
permitting, and so,
that's right.
Amanda, I mean,
Okay,
believe me, I'm
I
trying to,
understand.
I want to solve this more than y'all do. We've offered money, we've offered anything we can come up with, and the staff just is asking for more time to identify a property on it, and we're committed to do it. And so we'll, if it would give the board comfort to say that we commit to making best faith efforts to work with staff to identify a replacement location, we're absolutely comfortable committing to that.
I'm good with that. I think they're trustworthy. You gotta trust people. And go with what John suggested, except to work with staff for any additional.
Okay, so
It's
the,
hard to nail this down because it's kind of,
They want a number on
yeah.
staff.
Personally, I'd go with the 18 inches and with a commitment to try to work to plant extras outside. And I don't know, you can leave the number open to be decided by council. Hate to throw that to council, but
What was, just out of curiosity, what was the suggestion from the arborist as far as the spacing of the plantings?
One tree for every 300 square feet.
At the current 18-inch calculation, that comes out to needing about 7.5 acres of unplanted land in order to
That's,
plant back the requirement.
that's where I was going with that, to
Did
say,
some quick math.
That's exactly right. About 8 acres of replacement property that we could max out responsibly so that it would have mature canopy, once they get to a certain height.
okay, so, let's see, so we have the motion for 18,
Right, for 24.
24, sorry, my apologies, for 24. And that was seconded.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So I guess we need to go ahead and vote on that if there's no more discussion. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Okay. I will vote no, but the motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. I believe, are you the next agenda item as well?
Yes, ma'am, I believe our phase 2 is.
Okay.
Shelley, did you want to give an overview on that, or would you prefer that I do? Or-
Either one is perfectly fine by me.
But yeah, why don't you give just a quick, and I can supplement with answer any questions or provide any additional context. Whatever's easiest. I'm here.
Okay, to give you all an idea of where we are basically right across the street. So this parcel here is the one that we were just looking at.
I'm sorry, Shelley, could I interrupt? Which way is north on the map?
Great question. North is coming up to my top right-hand corner here.
Okay,
That
okay,
area is going towards.
Gotcha.
Turtle Lake, yeah.
okay.
Yep. So we're looking at additional land in Chatham County. This is the site that we were just looking at. You can see my mouse at all. I know it's difficult to. Just on the other side, there's additional properties that we were able to see that are kind of long and narrow. And those are shown here. Then there's additional land there and there. This is a much larger development. It's approximately 3 times the size of the last one. And as you can see, there's a variety of stream buffers and existing forested land as well on these. To the bottom left-hand corner here, this would be across the street from Cedar Crossings and Deer Creek, just to give you an idea. The applicant is proposing to bring in additional uses, mostly my understanding is, sorry, my computer's being slow today. Additional manufacturing and other industrial style uses as well. We're looking at, here we go, 236.5 roughly acres. With a variety of warehousing, manufacturing, and other industrial office space as well. In addition, some restaurants, medical offices, medical laboratories, items of that nature. The architectural conditions will be consistent with phase 1 rezoning that we just looked at. And Amanda provided, or these conditions were provided by the applicant. These are their suggestions. The post-development peak runoff shall not exceed the 25-year storm. At least 1 sign per SCM about no fertilizer to be installed in paths that are publicly accessible. Project will preserve at least 15% of the existing tree canopy. Preserved areas may include but are not limited to RCA perimeter buffers, riparian and/or common areas. To improve energy efficiency, they'll plant evergreen trees on the northern sides of all buildings as a windbreak. Shall not apply where loading docks are proposed. A combination of large and tall and small deciduous shade trees shall be planted on the southern side of all buildings. Again, shall not apply where loading docks are proposed. And the project shall plant only drought-tolerant native plants to be coordinated with the planning department. At least 1 RCA information sign shall be provided at the boundary of an area dedicated as RCA. The project is also proposing light timers and other smart lighting technology on at least 50% of the fixtures so that the light levels are reduced when businesses are closed. And all outdoor lighting shall be shielded in a way that focuses lighting to the ground.
These are the same zoning conditions that town council approved for phase one, except for the trees, right?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. And yeah, this is the exact same conditions, and we're proposing the same tree replacement of 24 inches, or recommending such. And if I could, just to supplement Ms. Mayo, so this is the, phase two is the northwest corner, which was the Butler Booth property that was, that is for the last 30 years been timbered and is currently clear cut. And then to the southwest of 64 is the Burkett parcel, which was farmed for generations up until fairly recently. The outline uses are the same as phase one, with the exception of a few additions based on collaboration with staff to include some service support, retail, and restaurant use. And so this hard corner intersection was designated based from Chatham County as a future employment center or employment node. And so the uses are intended to be consistent with the Chatham County plan for job growth, job creation, business uses. And so in phase two, we are looking at a limited amount of retail to just service what we think will be office and industrial, business parks in the subsequent phase.
Have you done a tree survey yet, or do you anticipate the survey to be similar to?
We're doing it now. The preliminary feedback is that because it's been timbered, is that it's more consistent with the gray parcel to the north of our phase one project, but it's in process now. So we will have that before we formally submit.
I do just,
I
oh,
do
go ahead.
not have property lines, but I can show you aerials from May for this area. Unfortunately, I don't have Chatham County property lines though. So this area has all been cleared within the last,
Between 2019 and 2021, it was cleared.
no, these aerial images are from May.
Right, I'm saying it was,
Yes,
yeah.
Yeah, historically, the Booth Butler tract or the Cant Hook property on the northwest corner has been timbered, harvested for timber for decades.
In the 2019 aerials, there were trees, and the 2021 aerials, there were not. It looked like this.
Well, right, but it had been harvested before, but,
In May, just a
Yeah.
couple months ago.
right, on intervals, and then they harvest when the diameters get mature, but yes.
So just where all these properties are located, I just want to acknowledge that they have a lot of environmental considerations compared to other parts of the town. I mean, this whole area is in an important bird area that's been designated by the National Audubon Society as being very important for the long-term viability and conservation of bird species in North Carolina. There's documented bald eagle nests not too far from the site. There's colonial waterbird colonies close by. The parcels, your north parcel boundaries are adjacent to wildlife resource smoke awareness boundaries, as well as the game land hunting safety buffers. So there's a lot of stuff going on here. It's very close to the lake. You've got tributaries that drain directly into the lake. And it's only about 3 miles from the water intake for Apex. So that's not even including how close you are to the lake itself, which people use for all kinds of outdoor experiences and for a diversity of outdoor experiences. And there's not a lot of places that draw that diversity of people for those kinds of activities. So I really do think it's important to be thoughtful about what goes in this area. I know Chatham did have a circle around this area, it was just a circle with a buffer distance on it that said, hey, employment center. But surrounding that, they did zone it residential, R1. So they had a very different vision for what's going on around this intersection than what is sort of being proposed, and I do just want to acknowledge that, because this is in Chatham County. And they did have some plans about this area, so I just think it's important to acknowledge that this is not the same as other light industrial areas that you have in Apex. There are a lot of environmental considerations here. And I appreciate the list that you provided, but I would like to see perhaps your stormwater bumped up to the 100-year storm. I'd like to propose an additional 30 feet of riparian buffer on what's required. And in acknowledgement of the Chatham County environmental rules, which are a little more stringent, or not stringent, they have different distances. In acknowledgement of those, I'd like to see wetlands buffered by 50 feet and a 30-foot buffer put on ephemeral streams, which is consistent with what Chatham County has. I also would like to see the condition about no clearing within riparian buffers, except for Town of Apex utilities. And then the dark sky criteria, or are those already in the UDO?
They're not in the UDO yet.
Okay, well then, the dark sky criteria.
I think what they have done is they took our recommendations on the dark sky and put them in the last two, the last two conditions.
Just the outdoor lighting.
The outdoor, and then
Miss Smart.
above that, the project shall install light timers and other smart lighting technology.
Okay, but that doesn't include the temperature of the lights.
No, it does not.
Suzanne, would you
Yes.
mind repeating the conditions again?
For the 100-year flood stormwater condition, an additional 30 feet of riparian buffer on top of what is required, to be consistent with the Chatham County environmental rules. Wetlands shall be buffered by 50 feet and a 30-foot buffer on ephemeral streams. And no clearing within riparian buffers except for the Town of Apex utilities. And then the dark sky. And board, feel free to discuss any of those. And let's see. And the ones to be consistent with the Chatham County environmental rules where wetlands are buffered by 30 feet. And ephemeral stream, or I'm sorry, wetlands by 50 feet and ephemeral streams by 30 feet.
I guess understanding the connectivity to go from building to building, there's gonna have to be some sort of impact with, like I say, again, not having a site plan to look at, it's harder to envision where, you know, you got your potential future building, but you also gonna have parking areas and, you know, interconnectivity from building to building to be able to get to these different pieces, so there will be to some degree of some impact through 4144 for permits to be able to have that impact to get across there. So maybe it's what you say, but other than permitted for accessibility.
Except for perpendicular stream crossings.
Well, yeah, it'll be a perpendicular stream crossing.
It looks like those are the buffer. Are there buffer impacts already?
So are these 50 and 100? Is that how are these set up? So you'll have a 50-foot and you're
Right, so
and then
they
you'll have the
already-
100. So you already have 200 feet across here as it is. Am I speaking correctly?
I'm not certain what you're pointing at. Yeah, I can't tell you.
I'm looking at the what you're looking at there in the northwest corner. There you go. So those streams there, is that already depicting a 50-foot and 50, so it's showing 100 on either side, or is that?
We don't have a buffer call for those, so we don't have the information for that at this point. It does look like that's what's left over after,
Clearing.
the clearing was done.
So
Yeah,
if
I mean,
those
this is
are,
such a preliminary site plan, but the
Right.
intent is to retain the 50-foot buffer and to limit disturbance within the buffer area so that there is none. I think to your point, if you look at the site plan, we're likely gonna have to have a bridge crossing, a perpendicular crossing at one point to access the rear of the site, but otherwise we're retaining and not impacting any of the buffer areas.
I think you could potentially do minimum disturbance on that crossing, where as opposed to it being a full width road, it pulls together in the width of that road where the crossings will be,
So,
to lessen the impact of the crossing.
I think in just discussing that, Mr. Adams, one of the concerns is that I think transportation staff is gonna wanna see some collector road connectivity, likely, again, it's at such preliminary stages, but likely a collector road that spans across that crossing to provide access, further west of our property. And so my instinct is that it's gonna need to be constructed to town standard so that it can be dedicated, but we absolutely open to looking at that, how we can minimize the impact or the width.
Patrick, is this what if you look on the screen, is this what you were just saying? I can get the mouse out of the way.
The bottom one,
there, okay.
Add a condition recommending a narrowing of the road across the riparian buffers in order to limit impact.
yes, ma'am.
Can I ask, one of the uses was a pilot plant? What is that?
A pilot plant is a research facility. It's typically research and manufacturing that is typically somewhat smaller than your standard. It's intended to test out new technologies or new ways of manufacturing something. It is literally piloting an opportunity to manufacture or to develop something.
Okay,
So pilot not in terms of aviation, pilot
Okay.
in terms of attempts at something.
yeah, I had no idea. I was like, well, pilot can mean a bunch of different things and
I promise
plant
you
can
we're
mean a
not
bunch of different
building
things.
pilots in those.
Thank you, I appreciate that. And I also noticed on there that there was a truck terminal as a use. What exactly would that be involved?
I'm sorry?
A truck terminal?
So truck terminals can be for a variety of different situations. There's one just off of 55 that's for per year. It's essentially a place where a fleet of vehicles is typically stored and from whence they are sent out to go out and do their jobs. So this can be a truck terminal for dump trucks. It could be a truck terminal for 18-wheelers. It could be anything along those lines. They're typically vehicle storage where someone can rent either the truck or the services of the truck.
So it's essentially a large parking lot.
Essentially, they may also have some minor repair services on site, especially if they tend to repair their own fleet. But it's generally a large parking lot with a building for warehousing parts and things like that, and office frontage for coordinating where the trucks are going to be sent on a day-to-day basis.
So if it is something like that, with regard to capturing any pollutants that may come off those trucks, are there things that are done when the stormwater system is designed, or?
Nothing above and beyond, normally BDO.
Okay, so you could get that stuff washing theoretically into the lake. It's not gonna be oils and stuff like that, may or may not be captured by the stormwater system before it goes into the lake. It's not gonna be treated.
Maybe for an oil water separator, but that's something our utilities department would look at.
But all of their runoff would be captured on site anyway.
Like any site.
Just like with any other site, it would go through the storm filter or the stormwater system and get filtered out before it goes out into the local groundwater or stream.
Okay.
It's kind of a really low-tech use in terms of jobs and things like that, I think. It's kind of not something that is really advantageous for Apex to see go in the first place. And certainly there's a large impermeable surface involved
Yeah.
with it, so.
So I would like to suggest removing that as a use.
I agree.
I'm sorry, which use?
The truck one.
The terminal,
I think the only
Truck terminal.
question I would add is just what, from our perspective, where we see demand is gonna be downstream from a lot of the electric vehicle manufacturers that have made announcements, regionally. And so, I just wanna be mindful that the majority of them are gonna wanna have some type of truck parking or staging if there's vehicle manufacturing. So, again, I'm not being dismissive of the concern, but I think the intent by including that when we worked with staff on those uses, and I believe that's included in phase one as well, was to make sure we were positioning the project to be able to leverage some of the announcements that have been made relative to electric vehicles. So,
For the places down in Moncur?
there's been several, right? But
Right,
I
the
mean, I think.
VinFast and all that.
Correct, yeah, between Toyota and VinFast, we think that there's a likelihood that we'll have multiple downstream suppliers at Gateway that'll be working with both of those mega sites, and so,
One additional environmental concern to keep in mind too is that if a truck terminal is not allowed to locate here, that doesn't mean that the fleet won't be able to service the businesses in this vicinity. So you might end up actually extending the amount of vehicle miles traveled and the impacts of those pollutants if they're not allowed to locate nearby the businesses that they're working with.
Well, I understand that.
I believe that you do. I just felt the need to point it out, that's all.
More discussion about that, leave in, take out.
What would be the environmental impact if we were to recommend doing permeable surfaces on that versus impermeable?
I don't know. For their entire parking lot?
Yeah,
how's stormwater treated that way?
yeah, that's what,
If you
that's sort of my
You
question,
go into
yeah.
to that, your stormwater, capturing your stormwater changes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's true. You have to look at the use.
You're not-
It's gonna get clogged, but I mean, it might be an ongoing maintenance issue. But it's in the, design manual. The applicant is free to use it.
I mean, it would reduce runoff at the very least if you do that, but then again, runoff could be just going straight down
Straight
into
to
the
the ground,
groundwater.
or they're captured at a designed area,
Yeah.
I would think.
Would require a 100-year storm management help offset that, I would think. And this is so close to the lake, too. I fully agree with the 100-year storm request. But, and I didn't like the truck terminal, but I understand what the arguments are to keep it, too. That's,
We can
Makes
go ahead
sense.
and keep the truck terminal in, I guess, as a use. I will rescind that request. Okay, any more questions or comments, or,
I really think the dark sky stuff is handled
You
in
do?
the other conditions, yeah.
so what about
I
like?
mean, the lighting temperature, I think, would be the only thing you would,
Right,
uh,
so,
or maybe just say, lights will be 3,000 K or less.
Okay.
I think that's,
Like you had mentioned, that this is going to hurt a lot of the native environments and the birds and whatnot. Is there a point in there about putting in native pollinator gardens or native flora of some sort?
We can add that.
I need help with the verbiage on that, but I would like to have that added.
Is there a ratio that you would recommend?
There is a, can I just, do you mind if I read condition 6? Just, the project shall plant only drought-tolerant native plants, and landscaping should be coordinated and approved by planning department at the time of site plan or master plan subdivision review. Not saying that totally addresses your comment, I just wanted to make sure. I think we are committing to native plantings that are approved by staff, but.
Yeah.
Um,
What do you think, Susan?
I don't think that that's comprehensive enough to get at your pollinator point. Because those are drought tolerant, don't tend to be the ones that flower and berry and, stuff like that. So I think we have a couple different options, I think, on our current list. We do have the pollinator garden one. And then,
If I may, most of the drought-tolerant native plants that grow in North Carolina do flower and seed and provide berries as well.
are they also designated as the wildlife-friendly plantings?
They're typically on those lists, yes, and we can and there are many of both options available on those lists. So I am simply questioning, when you're thinking drought tolerant, are you thinking more the agaves and the yuccas?
Yeah, I'm wondering, that's a little ambiguous, like what that is, that,
Well, echinacea is also considered a drought tolerant plant that's heavily visited by pollinators and by birds. There's a variety of local flora and fauna that fall on the drought tolerant lists that are also the wildlife friendly ones.
okay.
So we could definitely make that work.
Okay, so do we need to put anything in there?
We'll also support pollinators and bird species.
Yeah,
Yeah.
wildlife, yeah,
Yeah, that sounds good.
yeah, I think that sounds really good.
I'd like to add something on solar, of course. And my understanding of this development is it might be leased buildings and sold buildings, depending on what you're doing. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. We would customarily, we're a long-term owner, and so I think the vast majority of the project would be retained by Beacon Partners, with the caveat that we do have some clients, like a Coca-Cola in Phase 1, that are insistent on owning their property, and so we'll serve a few built-to-suit clients, but I would suspect that the vast majority of the property will be owned and operated by Beacon, similar to our existing portfolio.
And you'll be leasing it out?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I put something together. I just said buildings that are sold to an end user, which would be Coca-Cola, I guess, shall have a minimum solar photovoltaic system of 20 kilowatts installed on the rooftop. 20 kilowatts is 50 panels. It's not real big, but it gets the sequence started. That when people look at this, usually they go, okay, I'm going to do something bigger to offset my power requirement. And I just said, if the rooftop cannot support a 20 kilowatt system, then the system sized to fit the rooftop shall be installed. I think that's, I tried to catch any building that is sold, and the reason is kind of what Shelley mentioned about apartments. If you're leasing a building to a tenant, then in the state of North Carolina, it's difficult for them to provide the electricity too. So I tried to get around that. Hopefully our legislators in Raleigh will define that. I've tried to find out if you could or could not, and I haven't gotten a definitive answer yet, but I'm pretty certain under state law right now you can't. So that's why I put that as a building that is sold to the end user.
Yes, sir. And I don't know if that was sent from Amanda to our development team, but I did get a chance to see the suggestion, and we're fully committed to exploring solar. It's something that Coca-Cola is proactively, they're not required to do it in their phase, and they're proactively investigating and have a consultant looking at design. I think the initial feedback is that there's so many second order effects with the roof system with respect to their mechanical equipment, refrigeration requirements. So the feedback that we've received is that preliminarily they're looking at some of the sections that have lowered canopy areas for arrays that aren't going to have the rubber TPO membranes that the panel arrays would make routine maintenance or replacement repair problematic or more challenging. And then also they're looking at a small ground array on site. So again,
Okay, that could be changed then to 20 kilowatts supporting the building period, rather than put it on the rooftop. I was kind of hoping you'd have standing seam, quite frankly. I like that roof better. Personally, I think it's a better roof for long term, especially if you're leasing the buildings out forever.
yeah, again,
It's more expensive.
We're committing to, we want to figure out the best way to employ solar. I think the challenge that we've had is that every user has different mechanical requirements and different rooftop requirements, and that's not something that we, as the developer, govern. You know, they're built to spec. Even when we're leasing them out, more often than not, we're getting their standard building specification and working with the engineers around what their prototype is or what their load requirements are. And so it's admittedly challenging to commit to a blanket one-size-fits-all policy when everyone's going to have different rooftop requirements, different material requirements, different loads, and different cooling requirements. But again, I appreciated the note, and I'm serious in saying that I'm very confident that Coca-Cola is going to have some. I just don't know what it's going to look like yet, and they've got a consultant and an engineer working on it, and the same thing goes for the rest of the project. We'd love to figure out a way to integrate it that I guess would not be a deterrent to potential employers. And I think that's the balance of if you say that a purchaser, an end user that wants to relocate at the project has to do something, generally that's viewed as a negative, frankly, right? When their development team tries to do their site selection, they want to make sure that it's going to accommodate all of their requirements. And so, again, I think it's something that we're committed to exploring further. So I appreciate the note on it, and yeah, my hope is that we have it in both phases.
Well, 20 kilowatts is twice the size of what a lot of houses have. And most buildings, like the ones that you have cartooned up here, could probably stand 150 or 200 kilowatts.
Yes, sir.
Even allowing for HVAC or anything else that's up there. So I chose 20 kilowatts just as a seed to get the plant growing.
Yes, sir.
That's all.
Yeah, understood.
And I would expect that you would be able to accept that.
Mr. Jensen, could you just double check for me to make sure I have it written out correctly for you?
See what she wrote.
I can see it. I'll give it to you if you'd like. Well,
I'll get it from you at the end of the meeting if that's acceptable. Oh, thank you.
just happen to have it written down. It's not my handwriting, so you're lucky. But that can be, let's get it down and then we can decide.
I think we also have some standard language about green building certification. I know that there's a number of properties on this, a number of buildings on this property, so hopefully at least one of them can meet a green building certification. I know that there's some energy efficiency plantings, but hopefully there's some more options for getting these buildings even more energy efficient. If we can't do solar, we can at least reduce the electric load.
Are you referring to things like insulation, R values?
Is this what you were looking at?
Yes, yeah, yep, our standard green building certification language. I'd like to see LEED personally but I know that there are some more stringent ones.
So you said your preference would be for lead, but,
I mean, that's just industry standard, but a number of those I'm sure would work. There are some even more stringent ones, I think, in that list.
okay. Okay. Any further questions, comments, revisions?
Go back up to the color temperature. I think it needs to be the lighting temperature, not color.
Okay. There are no further comments or questions. Is there a motion regarding these zoning conditions?
I didn't see, do we have the 100-year storm in there? Okay,
Yes.
okay.
Yep.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Okay,
Second.
second? Okay. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
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 All opposed indicate by saying no. Okay, motion is unanimously passed. Okay, thank you very much for your time tonight and for speaking
No,
with us.
thank y'all and the board sincerely. I know, we don't take the ESG component of all of our projects lightly, and so appreciate all the feedback and thought around it, and excited to continue to invest in Apex.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks, Ms. Mayo. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay. That concludes our business for tonight. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Okay, second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, we are adjourned at 7.